He left me in the lobby with his head held high and a cruel smirk that still burned in my mind, not because I was heartbroken, but because he truly believed he had won something, had reclaimed power in a marriage he had long since abandoned emotionally. And I sat there in silence, not because I had nothing to say, but because I knew my words would be wasted on a man who saw me as ornamental, a soft-spoken woman, too dull to match his ambition, too meek to understand business, too gentle to recognize manipulation. And as I watched him stride out of the hotel like some victorious executive putting his burdens behind him, I quietly sipped the jasmine tea the staff brought me. The same staff who, unbeknownst to him, knew me as the elusive founder of the very hotel he had just stormed out of. Because what Robert never cared to learn was that I was not some lost little housewife tagging along for anniversaries. I was the architect of everything luxurious that surrounded him, the mastermind behind the empire that bore my signature on every blueprint, the decision-maker in every boardroom whose existence he ignored because he never asked who paid the bills, who signed the contracts, who negotiated the rates and planned the expansions. Never asked, because he assumed it couldn't be me. And maybe that was his first mistake, or maybe his mistake was falling in love with a woman whose silence he mistook for weakness, not realizing that still waters don't just run deep, they hold oceans of power, storms of intent, and islands of quiet revenge. And I had let him play his games, let him mock my work, let him flirt with interns and pretend I didn't know, because I was always playing the long game, not out of vengeance, but because I refused to shrink myself to fit his shallow definition of success. And now, sitting in the same hotel where he had humiliated me hours earlier, I could finally let the facade drop, not with drama, not with screaming, but with poise, because I had spent years building this chain, brick by brick, city by city, never announcing my name, using shell companies and silent investors, appearing only as Ms. Elise in confidential meetings, all while he dismissed me as a glorified travel agent. I still remember the first time I overheard him laughing with his friends about how I was living the dream, working part-time and spending his money, and I swallowed that pain with grace, because I knew one day he'd learn whose money he'd been spending, and it wasn't his. And now that day had come ironically, in the very penthouse I personally designed for VIP guests who paid over $10,000 a night, a suite he had abandoned me in after a childish argument about how I didn't understand what it took to be a real entrepreneur, unaware that the custom marble floors beneath his feet were shipped from Carrara under my supervision, the art on the walls handpicked by me in Paris, the staff trained under a culture manual I wrote myself. And as I stood in front of the panoramic glass window that overlooked the skyline I helped shape, I let myself breathe, for the first time, not as his wife, but as myself, Felice Montgomery, founder and CEO of the Montgomery Hotel Group, owner of 37 luxury hotels across 14 countries, a name whispered in luxury hospitality circles, but never splashed across tabloids, because I never needed validation from the public, only clarity within myself. And when he returned, the next day, wallet lost, flight cancelled, arrogance melted into panache, walked into a trap he didn't even know existed, because the front desk staff, ever so polite, handed him a golden boast envelope with his name, containing a sweet key and a handwritten note. Join me in the executive owner's lounge. And confusion spread across his face, like fog, as he was escorted to the top floor by a butler whose salary I approved, stepping into a world he assumed he belonged to, yet never realized was mine all along. And there, surrounded by glass, gold, and grace, he saw the wall of accolades bearing my name: Forbes, Entrepreneur, Hotelier of the Year, and, at the center, a large photo of me shaking hands with the mayor at the grand opening of this very property. And for once, he was speechless, mouth half open, as I approached him, not in rage, but in elegance, dressed in the same emerald gown he had dismissed as too flashy just a night before. now glowing with the confidence of a woman who no longer needed his permission to shine, and I said calmly, "Robert, welcome to my hotel," and watched him struggle to find air, as if he had been punched by the truth he had avoided for years. And I didn't gloat, didn't scream, didn't insult him. I simply sat, poured him a glass of the wine he once told me I wasn't cultured enough to appreciate, and handed him a folder, inside which were the divorce papers I had prepared months ago, complete with a generous settlement, not out of kindness, but because I wanted to sever ties without bitterness, to walk away clean. And he looked up, eyes wide, voice shaking, asking, "How when?" And I replied, "While you were busy building your ego, I was building an empire." And silence fell again, this time not out of awkwardness, but realization, the kind that breaks a man from the inside out. And I explained it all, how I used my inheritance to buy a rundown motel in Arizona, renovated it myself with local contractors, flipped it into a boutique hotel that went viral for its design, reinvested every cent into the next location, and the next, until I had a chain so elite even Robert's colleagues booked stays in it, without ever knowing they were sleeping in a room designed by the woman he ignored nightly. And when I was done, I stood, looked him in the eye, and said, "You didn't just leave your wife in a hotel, Robert. You left your future in the lobby of her kingdom." And as I walked away, I felt nothing but peace, because I knew that chapter was closed, not with a bang, but with dignity, the kind that only comes from knowing your worth doesn't shrink when someone else refuses to see it. And as the elevator doors closed behind me, I smiled, Nate, because he finally saw me, but because I had stopped needing him too. Sometimes, the best revenge is quiet success. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more powerful stories.